Whenever somebody talks about a Netflix show being a hit show, they're actually lying, because nobody knows, apart from Netflix, how many people are actually watching Netflix shows. And that's a huge problem if, say, you're a television show creator and you want to negotiate more money for your second series because you think it's been a hit, but you don't know because you don't know how many people are watching, because Netflix don't want anybody to know. But that may well be about to change. Jono Seidler is from the advertising agency M&C Saatchi, and Olivia Rosenman is the executive producer of the media show The Fourth Estate. Jono, exactly what's changing today?
Oh, God love Nielsen, really. I went to the Google Brandcast event a couple of weeks ago.
That sounds exciting.
It wasn't.
Was that the one that Elton John?
That was the exciting part.
Okay.
We had to go through 3 hours of conversations to get to.
Did he do Tiny Dancer?
He did.
All right.
Anyway, so in that like cavalcade of white dudes in suits making presentations, there were the people from Nielsen who were trying to brag about this new metric that they had for YouTube videos.
Yeah, and we should say Nielsen are the company that famously did TV ratings for a very long time.
Yes, and are obviously dragging themselves into the new age. Or dragging themselves. I mean, I think they're making a really good effort, but it's really funny the ways in which they're going about it to try and be like, look, still relevant. Oh my God! And the way that they're doing it with Netflix is particularly interesting. They're using basically a workaround of Netflix has like a little black box which prohibits people from being able to track how many people are watching a certain show. And so what they're doing is they're matching audio recordings of what comes out of your TV to, I assume, like a library of metadata.
Like Shazam.
It's essentially Shazam. And then they're reporting that as figures, right? And Netflix have obviously come out and be like, bruh, that's definitely not true and not how things are measured. And I feel like the fact that they had to come out and say that means that it's quite close.
Yeah, I reckon.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a precise science, and I can definitely see why Nielsen want to do it, because it then gives them that point of difference again.
Yeah, it's very smart for Nielsen to want to get into this space because there's such a demand for it. It's also worth pointing out that Netflix's black box approach to audience measurements is pisses people off. It pisses television producers off. And one of the greatest tools that the American streaming networks Hulu and Amazon have is that they actually do give some of that feedback back to their creators as well. So I guess how much of a grain of salt should we be taking these numbers?
Ted Sarandos, yes, he called them wildly inaccurate. I think there is something to be said, however, because it is only going to measure people watching on television sets. Think about all the people watching on public transport. That's a big deal, considering the whole thing about video on demand is that you're watching it in your on-demand times when you're not necessarily sitting in front of your TV set.
Maybe they're literally just measuring me in front of my TV set.
Yeah, just you.
6.1 billion times.
6.1 billion sideless. That should be the metric in which they are delivered.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
The other problem, or potential grain of salt, if we're putting it that way, is that they are only measuring US subscribers, and more than half of Netflix's around 104 million subscribers are outside of the US. So there is something to it.
As part of a proof of concept, Nielsen have released a bunch of preliminary figures about what are the most watched shows on Netflix. And I was sort of curious, as you go through some of the metrics they've produced, so the average viewership for the first episodes of Netflix Original, as you go through what they've already put out, what surprised you in terms of what they'd already released?
The Defenders. I mean, that was kind of universally panned, which means that maybe everyone watched 5 minutes and turned it off, and that could count as a, like, what, I don't know where the audio grab is coming from, right? It takes 5 seconds to identify a song on Shazam, even less.
But it was universally panned, and I think this speaks to another interesting thing, which is the way we talk about Netflix shows as what's a hit and what's not is a complete misnomer, because we don't really know what is a hit, what is not. What we know is what gets cultural cachet. So we know that for the next week, Stranger Things is going to be the most talked about TV show in this country, right? We sort of know that. But at the same time, there's no correlation between who's actually watching it. And I remember talking to the head of the Directors Guild of America a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago on the show, and he was like, yeah, I don't think any of those shows are as big a hit as people think they are. It's just about perception building. And of course, that is so much about what Netflix's brand is about. They control and can use hype without anybody ever having to go, well, it actually didn't do that well, which is what TV networks have to
Yeah, but chatter is interesting. I mean, surely that's a metric that I would be looking at if I was, and probably Netflix does, but if I was Nielsen, I would be trying to combine. It's kind of like when you look at like music streaming versus downloads versus purchases, and how they all kind of now combine to create what's the #1 album in Australia or whatever it is, or #1 song. By the same token, I would be combining chatter, because while there are a lot of people just talking about it for the sake of talking about it, there's also a large proportion of people who are talking about it because they're actually watching it and they're live, they're doing it in real time.
Yeah, but absolutely, I think, and this is what Netflix has been saying in response to this news from Nielsen, is that the viewership is largely irrelevant because their business model is based around subscribers. So if you've got all this hype about shows that are only on Netflix, as with Stranger Things or House of Cards,
you own
that's
the
enough for
conversation.
them. Yeah, you own the conversation.
If you had total control over the universe, what kind of metrics would you like to get that don't currently get serviced to you?
Drop-off rates.
Drop-off rates?
100% drop-off
Where
rates.
specifically drop-off rates?
Companies like Amazon can actually track down to the second or down to, and Netflix don't do it as well. They just don't release it, which is they know when people turn off from a show, and they actually build shows based around that particular time period in every show or every season where they know that they can kind of hook you in and keep you. I would be curious how successful some of those are in different seasons and different iterations and things like The Defenders or whatever it is, and whether that moves from being I've got you in for this new show called Stranger Things to, I'm still interested in Stranger Things season 4, 5, or 6.
All right, more of this on the podcast. So download the show. It is available right now on all of the podcasting apps. Good ones, bad ones, mediocre ones. Also, the brand new ABC Radio app called ABC Listen. See you there.